Good morning, United States, and welcome to another episode of the Bernie or Bust Show, unshaved, unbathed, unedited, and unscripted. We have a good point to make here about Bernie Sanders and climate change, and then we'll go on as to what we should do about it. So let's start with David Dole, the Rational National, and see what he has to say about climate change. And while you're waiting, you could look at Natalie and what she says about climate change. This was very insightful of Natalie. And now here is Bernie Sanders and David Dole.
We will hold them accountable.
We will hold, you'll find out who accountable in a minute.
Inspired by climate activist Greta Thunberg, millions all over the world are taking place in a global climate strike. From Thailand to the Philippines to Scotland to the UK to Japan to Australia, where it is actually the largest demonstration in Australian history. Now, to seriously deal with this climate crisis, the world needs a political leader, preferably somebody in the United States of America, as the US is still the world's superpower. But thankfully, there is one Democratic candidate that is showing the leadership that is needed on this issue, not to mention on every other issue, and that candidate is Bernie Sanders. So last night there was an MSNBC climate forum where Bernie was invited on to discuss his climate plan, and interestingly enough, the other two leaders in the race, Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren, did not show up. So
that point needs to be addressed. Why did the progressive and the regressive not want to show up for a climate change? And it comes right down to what David will say is that that the owners of society don't want that, and so the people who are owned by those owners will pass on a climate change. And then right here is a good place to insert the difference between Sanders voters. David says that we need a leader. We need a leader in the superpower of the United States to take a leadership role, and we need a president of the United States to be a leader in reversing climate change. We're on the brink of a disaster, and Bernie's the only one who is willing to tackle the true root cause of this problem. Everybody else wants to play patty cake and not hold the leaders accountable, but just maybe talk them into being a little bit less egregious. So here is the difference between Bernie Sanders supporters, because if we have a leader who will lead the people who want to fix this, we're good. If we have a leader who wants to get back to brunch, and we're not so good, because it's not just the leaders, it's who follows them. So the followers of Bernie, the main difference between Bernie's base and Warren's base, Bernie's base is angry at the entire system and wants to fight to change it from the ground up. Bernie's base wants to hold fossil fuel accountable. It wants to hold all the central bankers and all the big money interests, transnational corporations, pharmaceuticals companies, Monsanto and big food companies, and everyone who's causing cancer. Bernie wants to solve this problem from the ground up. And so his angry base will follow his angry lead and will fix this. Warren's base is angry at Trump and wants someone to beat him so they can go back to brunch and go back to business as usual, go back to raping and pillaging the planet and raping and pillaging the workers who produce all the surplus that we enjoy, or that some of us enjoy, few of us enjoy. And so this is important. That's why Elizabeth Warren and that's why Joe Biden were not at the climate change summit or forum. Let's keep going here with David.
So I have a few clips here to show you. This first one, Bernie Sanders discusses the need here to act boldly when it comes to the climate crisis.
You're talking about administering this at a level.
Chris Hayes, you are an effing idiot. Chris Hayes is working directly for the machine. Jimmy Dore points it out often. And I like the way Bernie deals with Chris here. Way more nicely than Jimmy Dore would deal with him, but good grief.
Level that hasn't been done since World War II. It would be an enormous change to the capacity of the government.
Chris, what you are telling me is that this is tough.
Yes.
I acknowledge that. Okay? But what is the alternative? All right? I'm told that it is expensive. And I'm told by Chris, correctly so, this is administratively very, very difficult. He's right. But you tell me what the alternative is if we do not act boldly and aggressively. All right, not only are we fighting for your kids and your grandchildren to be living in a planet that is healthy and habitable, all right, but I should also tell you that this plan, Chris, in the middle of that transition, creates up to 20 million good-paying jobs. All right, how so? We're going to need we're talking about energy efficiency. And that means an understanding that in my state of Vermont, where a lot of old buildings all over this country, we could retrofit buildings to cut the utilization of energy by 50% or more. It takes a lot of workers to do that. If we are going to be aggressive in moving to sustainable energy, wind and solar, I want those panels and other technologies to be done here in the United States of America. Massive amounts of work that have to be done. If we're talking about the electrification of our transportation system, that means creating a new rail system in America. We are already way behind Europe and Japan in that regard. That takes an enormous amount of work, building those locomotives and those trains and the subway systems. So, I will not argue with you for 1 second that this is going to be administratively very, very difficult. But nobody has given me an idea of what a better alternative is.
All right. Before I get to, Bernie Sanders and his plan here, I just find the way the media deals with this issue, and really the way the mass media deals with most issues, it's so backwards. It's so negative, so pessimistic. They always, instead of actually inspiring candidates to action, like instead of Chris Hayes saying, we have this huge climate crisis, the world is being destroyed, what are you going to do to stop that, to fix this? The question instead is, well, your plan is so big, I mean, we can't even get it done. It's almost impossible. Why are you even trying? It's always so negative.
And why is that? He'll allude to it, but he doesn't come right out as clearly as I'd like him to and say it's because the people paying Chris Hayes to say everything he says don't want it to happen. Let's give David a chance here.
What the media should be doing is trying to inspire candidates, inspire politicians, inspire people to get involved, to change things, to make the world better. But instead what they do is the opposite. Instead of inspiring people to action, they inspire them to inaction, to stop, to give up. It's absurd. But let me just show you. So Bernie Sanders, if you don't know, has by far the most comprehensive climate plan. He has a $16 trillion climate plan that Gizmodo here is saying is nothing short of a revolution. And part of that plan, part of the reason why Bernie's plan is so comprehensive is because in addition to dealing with the crisis head on, he also takes care of the workers that may lose their job in the transition away from fossil fuels.
When I'm talking to truck drivers, they are desperately hoping, especially the ones 40 and younger, that something gets done here that will transition them to some sort of gainful employment where they can continue to pay for their children's schooling, they can pay for their medical bills, they can pay for their groceries. This is a big deal, and what Elizabeth Warren is describing is relief somewhat, but I don't think what she's describing is going to take power away from the people who have always, especially in the last 70 years, just wanted to exploit us. Us meaning workers, whatever color your collar is, This kind of exploitation is happening on purpose. I don't think wrist slaps are going to do it, or finger waving is going to do it. Bernie wants to take these. Well, you'll see in a few seconds on this clip what Bernie wants to do about it.
So Bernie discusses that here.
The guys who work on oil rigs, people who work in coal mines, people who work in the fossil fuel industry, they are not my enemy. They are my friends. And we are not going to do what others have done and turn our backs on those people. And as you know, if you're familiar with the proposal that I've introduced, we have allocated tens of billions of dollars for what we call a just transition. And so what we're saying to those workers, look, we don't hold you responsible for causing climate change, all right? But we have got to move away from fossil fuel. And what we build into our proposal is 5 years. 5 years of full pay, of health care, of job training, of education.
So what Bernie addresses here is what conservatives have done to this conversation, where anytime you discuss dealing with the climate crisis, what conservative politicians do, conservative, media does, is they try to make it sound.
And neoliberal, don't forget to say neoliberal politicians and neoliberal media, it's even worse there.
Like, well, it's going to come down on the average person. It's going to hurt the average person if we try to save the planet. But what Bernie is doing here is addressing that head on and saying, no, even if you are in this situation where you work in this industry, you're just the average worker, and you lose your job because we have to move away from fossil fuels, you will be taken care of. You will have full pay for 5 years and retraining for another job, likely in renewable energy, because there'll be millions and millions of new jobs created in this industry. So this, he is the only candidate that is saying this, that is doing this. And this is what allows people to really understand this is not, dealing with the climate crisis is not a zero-sum game. It's not, to save the planet, you have to lose your job, and we all have to have a complete transition in our lives, and our lives are going to be negatively affected because of it. No, the average person, the average worker can be saved in this transition.
And that part, the average worker can be saved. The average worker has been taught to think that the raging socialists are going to take away resources from the average person. That's not true. But they are going to take resources away, but most importantly, control away from the oligarchs. And that's where, David looks so kind of innocent to me. He looks kind of surprised that these silly media people are acting this way, but they're paid to act that way. They're paid to make the average worker think that Bernie's plans are going to directly sacrifice their livelihood. And they're getting paid. Watch Chris Hayes' body language here in a second when Bernie really points out the people that we need to hold accountable. Chris is like, he looks like a little beaten down puppy because he knows his masters don't like what Bernie is saying right here. He doesn't smile, he doesn't fist pump, and doesn't bump fists with Bernie, he doesn't give him a high five. He's like, oh my goodness, I just got swatted because I let Bernie say this on my watch, on my show. My masters are not going to like this.
If you have a leader like Bernie Sanders that is willing to do that. Now, when it comes to the wealthy executives, the wealthy fossil fuel executives that got us into this situation, well, it's a little different for them.
Yeah.
Because they understand what they are doing. For years, they have understood what they have done to the planet.
Right.
And Bernie addressed how he'll deal with those executives as well.
Yeah, what do you do? What do you do? And I want you all to think about it.
Look
The
at Chris.
answers are not so simple, but I have my ideas. What do you do with an industry?
Look at Chris Hayes' body language. He's like, uh-oh, now it's coming.
Who for years spent, tens of millions of dollars into phony think tanks, corporately run think tanks.
Now, here's where you make the case. It isn't just conservatives, because these phony corporate-run think tanks are Third Way and Center for American Progress. And these are connected to Obama and the Clintons every bit as much as they are to Reagan, Bush, both Bushes, and other conservatives in Congress.
putting stooges up on television telling the American people, well, the evidence is not clear whether climate change is real or it's not real. They knew that it was real. Their own scientists told them that it was real.
So he is talking about Republican think tanks too, but we can't let Bernie let the Democrats off the hook. We all of us watching Bernie and wanting to follow him into battle, we need to hold Bernie accountable too. We need to make sure that the people he's holding accountable are on both sides of the political aisle.
What do you do to people who lied in a very bold-faced way, lied to the American people, lied to the media? How do you hold them accountable? How do you hold fossil fuel executives who knew that they were destroying the planet but kept on doing it? We will hold them accountable.
Look at Chris right there. OMG, I am in trouble now. So this is what you can do about it. This is Victor Tiffany with Revolt Against Plutocracy saying, only Bernie can unite the Democratic Party, and we need your help getting this message in front of suburban and rural party members. Victor is taking the gloves off. Victor is playing hardball. Victor is saying, look, you conservative-minded liberals, you need to realize that getting back to brunch is not the main issue. Beating Trump is not even the main issue. We have to have the only person right now, other than Tulsi Gabbard, who is truly serious about saving our planet and making life livable for the labor force. So this is what Victor says we should do about it.
I'm Victor Tiffany with Revolt Against Plutocracy, the organization behind the Burn Your Bust strategy. If you're a Burn Your Buster, you're going to want to share this special announcement. We need to get this idea, this strategy, in front of as many rural and suburban voters, Democrats, as we possibly can. We don't want or bust. We want Bernie. We want them to understand why Bernie is the strongest candidate to run against Donald Trump. On our website, burnyyourbust.info, we have a video that explains the various categories of Bernie or Busters. There's also the Bernie or Trumpers. And if you add them all up, they don't add up to the number of people who won't vote at all if Bernie Sanders is not the nominee.
He said that really well. It isn't just the Bernie or Busters that you should be mad at if you're a comfortable liberal. You should also be mad at the Bernie or Trumpers. You should be mad at the poor and poorly educated people who won't vote at all. You're not going to bring all of them to vote against Donald Trump. The only person who can bring all the people together to vote against Donald Trump is Bernie Sanders. Elizabeth would get her ass kicked in the general election against Donald Trump. And so it isn't just the Bernie or Bust people, but the Bernie or Bust people can help get the message out, and that's where you come in if you're watching this. And if you want to help, please leave a comment in the video below and I'll get you hooked in. But Victor is explaining well here that there are just too many people that the Democrats need to vote against Trump who won't vote against Trump if we have a regular sort of, or a garden variety neoliberal or a stealth neoliberal like Elizabeth Warren. If you watch yesterday's episode of Bernie or Bust, I'll show you in that video how you can plug into the Bernie or Bust guerrilla warfare squad if you're serious about this. If you realize that our planet is at stake and we need to roll up our sleeves and start to fight, join me. Again, leave your comment below and I'll plug you in. That's all I got for now. Keep on burning. Enjoy the Sunday, but realize that we only have a couple of months to get all this work done that I'm proposing or that I did propose in yesterday's video. So keep on burning.